So this is Quanisha Smith, the founder and chief activator of the Black Women Rise movement. And for those of you who are new to this community, welcome to Black Women Rise. We are a community of Black women who are ready to take charge of our lives so that we can thrive and live authentically. And I provide coaching and training to support Black women in crafting identities beyond societal, historical, and personal limitations in order for us to create lives rooted in self-love and sustainability and acquire the skills, confidence, and courage to help us stand in our self-worth and really achieve those next levels of success. And here we use career, economic, and personal development to support those aims. And today I'm so excited to interview and speak with Marc Bayard, the Associate Fellow and Director of the Institute for Policy Studies, the Black Worker Initiative, with an important issue impacting Black women's liberation, our families, and our communities. And that is Black women pay equality. So hi, Marc. Thank you for joining us.
Me.
Marc, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Marc. Thank you for joining us on this issue.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So just a little bit about Marc. So Marc Bayard is the Associate Fellow, like I said, Director of the Institute for Policy Studies, Black Worker Initiative. He spearheads the initiative And Still I Rise, Black Women Labor Leaders' Voices, Power, and Promise, an effort designed to engage Black women labor leaders and activists in exploring ways to leverage their organizing expertise for the preservation of the labor movement and the economic advancement of the Black community. He's a frequent speaker and social commentator for a number of institutions and organizations, and Marc's dedication to achieving just and humane treatment for workers worldwide is grounded in his firsthand work and experiences in nearly 50 countries. So Marc holds has two master's degrees, from Cornell University and Georgetown University, and is a highly regarded scholar of labor politics. And he's also the author of the forthcoming biography, Standing Together in Service, the William Lucy Civil Rights and the American Labor Movement. So that's a little bit about Marc. So welcome, Marc.
Thanks again. It's great. It's definitely great to be here and to be talking about such important subjects about Black women in work, and obviously Black women in the economy. They play such an important role in our economy, and it's often, if you're listening to mainstream news and media, you often don't hear about that. And part of our role today is really to sort of uplift that and to really look at some of the opportunities and challenges for raising Black women's voices and raising Black women's economic power.
So thank you. As you know, rise is our active verb in our movement, so we're all about that investment, that advancement and rising, really getting us to those next levels. So last week, your organization led the Black Women Equal Pay Day on July 28th, and the campaign called for Black women to clock out at 2:07 p.m. and take to social media to post time cards with their photos accompanied by the hashtag Black Women Equal Pay. So can you please share kind of what was the significance of that day and this call for Black women pay equity?
Sure. Well, first, let me say that there were a number of organizations involved in this effort. I'll just list a few, but I'm probably going to forget a few. The National Women's Law Center was heavily involved. 9 to 5, I know, was also heavily involved in this. The AFL-CIO was also involved in this effort, as well as many other organizations. In fact, someone just told me recently, we were trending on Twitter a couple of days ago because we had so many people involved in this. The Institute for Policy Studies was definitely involved, and the And Still I Rise project was involved. And we tried to do our involvement in a number of different ways. One was obviously activating our network of Black women in the labor movement to be engaged in this, activating the overall labor movement to be very much engaged in this. Because in many ways, for those who work in labor, given the fact that people have unionized contracts, so many of these pay equity issues are actually dealt with unionized contracts. But that does not mean that the labor movement should not be fully engaged in supporting those who are not in labor, which is actually the majority of Americans, and really showing solidarity and strength on this issue because it's such an important racial issue and it's such an important economic issue. So we were really trying to work and make sure that the labor movement was engaged in this, that Black women's organizations were engaged in this. The Ms. Foundation for Women was also heavily involved in this. And so part of what we did was that we put out a piece on Ebony called Trying to Make a Dollar Out of 64 Cents, which is kind of an ode to an old Tupac song, because we really wanted to get this issue out in the mainstream. We want people to know about it. We want people to understand the root, and we want people to know about possible solutions to deal with it.
And can you say a little bit more about the issue for those who might not be familiar or who didn't see maybe this trending? I know some of our community, as you know, is not very active on social media per se. So what is this issue around Black women pay equity?
The reality is that that all women, whether they be Black, white, Latina, or Asian, make less than white males. This data has been captured for a number of years. It's been verified. It is a fact. What's sometimes seen is whether it be on bumper stickers or sometimes in the news, is that women make 77 cents to a male dollar, to a white male dollar. Mm-hmm. And that's startling enough. But when you start to break this down by race, you find that African American women actually make 64 cents to a white male dollar. And Latino women actually make a little bit less than that. So what this day was on July 28th was a calculation that it takes 200 plus days into 2015 for Black women to make the exact amount that white males made at the end of 2014. So July 28th was actually highlighting the fact that it takes, I think, about 208 or 209 days for Black women to make the exact amount, hourly that white males made in order to make up that difference. So it's a shocking statistic, and it's shocking that we even have to have a day to look at something like this, but it both elevates how problematic the issue is. It really does raise some consciousness around the issue. It really breaks the issue down by race, which is also important. But it's definitely a day that we want to eliminate off the calendar.
Yes. And so what is the impact of Black women making less? So what are the social implications of that? So that 64 cent, us making less, particularly even compared to white women or white males, how does that impact our communities?
Impacts are huge. The impacts are huge, particularly when you look at the fact that Black women, far more than white women, are heads of households and are the sole breadwinners. So it's a real multiplier effect, because if you're making less than white males and you're making less than white females and you are the head of households, then that means your entire household is suffering. And given the number of Black women who are heads of households, this can really be, and as we can see in the overall economic statistics around where Black people are, a major drag on Black people's ability to live a authentic life in the United States. So it's a major issue impacting a goodly number of Black women in the United States. It's not just a flea flicker statistic; it impacts millions and millions of Black women, and thereby their families.
Right. So thank you for sharing how what we might be earning individually has these larger ripple effects when we think about our families and our communities and those implications. So can you tell us a little bit more about, the advocacy and organizing plans for this project? And I know you said one is a coalition effort in addition to what your organization is doing. So maybe it might be best to tell us a little bit more about the And Still I Rise project or initiative and leading to eradicate this wage gap.
Definitely. Well, and Still I Rise was created and launched in May of this year. And its goal is to highlight the voices of Black working women. We focused in on women who are involved in the labor movement because we see the labor movement as an important vehicle for elevating the voices and power of Black women. We really feel that a collective response has far more ability to impact women's economics and society than an individual response. And so the And Still I Rise project really highlighted 27 women in the labor movement. When I said the labor movement, let's really define this. We're talking about teachers. Mm-hmm. We're talking about nurses. We're talking about women who were trying to work in difficult occupations like construction. We're talking about women who are in the public sector as social workers. These are women that we know. These are women who work in grocery stores and bag food. Black women and the labor movement have been together for a long time, and it's something that we really wanted to elevate because it's not talked about enough. We all know someone who works at the post office. We all know women who have been involved in the labor movement, and those jobs are good-paying jobs that are slipping away. They really impact our community because, as I said before, most labor jobs pay more than obviously more than the 64 cents to a white male's dollar, and we need more of those jobs, and we need black women and black people to have more access to those jobs and to organize for better jobs like that. So that's what really our report highlights is, and how we felt that this issue was directly related is because statistics have shown that even in low-wage jobs, if a low-wage job is unionized, you make more. So for example, black union workers in low-wage jobs earn a median hourly wage of $15.60 compared to $12.05 for non-union low-wage jobs. So even in the low-wage field, if it's unionized, it's exactly that $3 an hour makes a difference. And so those are the kinds of things that we're trying to highlight. Also, the fact that what we found, well, not only what we found, but what other statistics have found for black women, being in a union, having a union job is actually a greater economic indicator for future earnings than a college degree. So so let's stop for that for a second. So having a union job means a lot. And the problem is that there aren't enough of them, and black folks don't have enough access to them. And so what we are trying to do with our project is to really push the envelope, both within the black community to demand more, and also for unions to do more. And because I think if they two come together, then whether it be huge low-wage employers like Walmart's and others, we'll see a lot of change. We'll see a lot of change. And the other thing I'd say is that black women have been isolated to a lot of low-wage industries historically, and even to this day, whether it be childcare, whether it be restaurants and serving, whether it be nursing homes, domestics. These are low-paying jobs that have to be made better in order to elevate the majority of black women who are working in those fields. So that's another thing that our report is really about. So that's really why we do our work and why we really feel this issue is so important, and also why we want to tie it into Black Equal Pay Day for women, because we wanted to really get this issue out to the mainstream. And speaking to you and your audience, we're incredibly excited because we think that the more black folks get this information, the more they have access to it in a simple, readily, easily digestible way, the more that we can demand more, particularly on the economic front. We've done a really good job demanding, things around civil rights. And obviously, even though there's a lot of backsliding in that, we continue to fight. Movements like Black Lives Matter have really elevated issues around police brutality. But now we also have to take on economic justice. We have to take the same fervor with the civil rights movement. We have to continue to fight for the Black Lives Matter movement. But we also have to really start looking at these economic justice issues, and we believe working on them collectively, trying to solely teach women individual techniques on how to get a raise with their employer. That's important, but a more collective response for people who can't negotiate. Imagine if you're a domestic worker, it's like you could have all the negotiation skills in the world, but it's going to be really hard if you are, coming to somebody's home every day to take care of their children, to have any leverage in a negotiation. And so we are trying to deal. And if you're working at McDonald's or other fast food places, it's very difficult to have that leverage. And that's why we think that we need to have policy solutions, and we have to have collective responses to elevate, black people in general.
Thank you for bringing attention. For those who might be new to the Black Civil Rights community, or just me, my background is in social justice and social and economic justice through community organizing and that work. So one, even though we think about the historic, I definitely want to highlight, Dr. King's next place, right, after a lot of that advocacy work was to this economic fight, the economic justice fight. So this is, an issue that we need to continue because really we live in a capitalist society, right? Economics is so important. And thank you. I wanted to highlight really this aspect of the collective and the individual. And I really see it, and I think, I'm not saying you didn't put it this way, but I see it as a both and, right? But we do have to acknowledge that some folks don't have the social power, if you want to say, or the ability to negotiate because of just the different roles, right? Like you said, it's hard as a domestic maybe to say I'm going to negotiate or push for this raise. You do need a union, or you need that collective power to really push social change. I definitely want to highlight that. But in your work, have you found that there are some things, or maybe from the movement and from the interviews that you have done with Black women labor organizers, are there any things that on an individual level that you feel Black women can do to work towards this pay equity? And even if that individual is getting active and creating collective change in their organizations. So are there any strategies that you found or that other women have suggested have been useful in thinking about this on as far as like personal empowerment for people?
Definitely. I mean, I think almost all of the women that we spoke to, they started from a sense of self and the need to have a strong sense of self, because this work is very difficult, and there will be a lot of challenges. There will be a lot of roadblocks put in people's way. So it's definitely important to have a sense of self. It's very important to have a sort of a smaller network of peers that you can rely upon in terms of bouncing off ideas and sharing ideas, whether that be written or oral or verbal. That's definitely important. Almost all of the women spoke about the need and the importance of leadership, leadership in themselves, that they see themselves as leaders, or they need to see themselves as leaders, and that they're willing to take that risk to be out there as a leader. But I think the most important thing is that they do that not solely for any kind of self-aggrandizement, but with the clear understanding that when they get themselves into these positions of leadership, that they will not only be speaking for themselves, but they'll be speaking for their larger community. And they're very clear on whose backs that they stand on. And I think that's really important, because I think that's very different than traditional models of leadership, very different than so many books that you can read about leadership and successful leaders and 7-point plans to be a successful leader. These women are very clear on that. And they're also very clear about the important role of mentorship, and the fact that everybody needs a mentor, whether you're a senior leader or you're just someone starting on the job, whether it's a union job or whether it's a corporate America job. People need to not only see people who look like them for diversity purposes, but also for real inclusion purposes. They need to have that ability to share, their experiences in the workplace with others like them, and they also need a sense that that the mentors, whether they're laterals or people who are above them, that they can really move ideas back and forth, and at some point, take some action with them. But it's also about self-learning and being self-critical and understanding. So mentorship is huge in the research that we've done around these Black women and work issues. And I think you talked about it earlier to me, that mentorship is, you found that mentorship is really important to your network as well. So it's not a surprise. Part of it is then, like, if that's something that people want to formalize, like, how do people go about it? And again, I think that's where you need a bit more of a collective response in order to implement and make something more standard, as opposed to maybe just a ad hoc or haphazard kind of process. I think that what the folks in our report were calling for is a need for this to be structured, and the need for this to be built into the process, a need for it to be potentially funded, so that it's just not an additional task that Black women take on as part of the invisible economy and a part of all the amazing amount of invisible work that they do, but that it's actually placed front and center, saying this is a best practice, and thereby this should be utilized the same way. I don't know, you're incorporating some Six Sigma best practice that you read, about in some, Harvard Business Review, kind of thing. Well, so I think that's the importance of making sure that it's not just an additional burden, but that it's actually incorporated into the body of work, whether that be a unionized operation or a non-unionized operation.
And that's so important, because there is, at least I've found that there is, and we see this in a lot of spaces, so whether it's in the classroom or whether in the work, there is this extra burden, right, that people who are from marginalized communities, and in this case we'll just talk about Black women, have to take on in trying to level the playing field, right? So in the guide that we have at blackwomenrise.com, if you go there, you'll see the 12 effective leadership resources for Black women. We talk about a lot of the strategies you just said, right? So really learning your strengths, forming your own team, right? So figuring out how to get coaching and mentorship. And I found that I've actually had to pay for a lot of those things because we don't readily have access in our organization, or like you said, in a structured way to Black women leaders. So Black women who can really maybe give you an inside perspective as well as share resources. So I've also had to do a lot of research on where are these leadership books, and not, like you said, not the standard maybe Eurocentric leadership books, but leadership books that have been written for Black women, many of them by Black women. And that's why I created this guide to offer like one resource that's structured and freely available. So it's like, here, don't have to take this time, right? I already have it for you. Here's a book. But
no, I think that's fantastic.
Have this extra time that, you know, we have to put into doing this, right? Now, how much money and time did I have to spend that if we did have a structured way I could have saved, and many other women could have saved time and money because maybe our union or our organization understood the value of this, and not only the success of the organization, but the success of the workers in our lives and our economic livelihood in that. So thank you for mentioning that is a burden that's often on people of color, particularly Black women, and having to have this advancement.
I think you're absolutely right with that, and and what we are saying is that we want unions to be another tool in the toolbox for Black women to know is available. We wanted people to know the history. We want people to know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but also to know that overall it has been an amazingly successful mechanism historically for elevating Black people and moving Black people into the middle class. I mean, just think about cities like Detroit and, the Motor City back in the day.
Right.
All of those jobs at Ford, GM, and Chrysler were union jobs. People moved from the south to the north to take those union jobs in those factories. And when they were humming, places like Detroit were humming. Baltimore, very similarly, so many of these hotspot cities that were dealing with so many issues. Baltimore used to be a thriving city with a number of African Americans working in a range of different unions and at different factories, both men and Black women. And so we want people to know that history. We want people to know that Black women today make up the second largest percentage of folks who are in unions. People don't know that. Only second to Black men. So Black people are still in unions. The public sector, and then when we talk about the public sector, we're talking about everything from EMTs and firefighters, teachers, nurses, social workers. Black women make up the largest percentage of public sector employees. So when you hear about places like Wisconsin, where the governor is cutting public sector jobs, or they tried that in Ohio, you have to look at the fact it's not just about the firefighters or the EMTs or the police officers that they tout. It's about the Black women working in the postal office, Black women working in the social. So we want to make sure that history is captured, because those are very good jobs that have not just wages and benefits but pensions when you retire. So it's not just about today's wages; it's about the ability to retire. And so we want Black women to really see unions as a viable vehicle going forward, not just a historical, anachronistic thing, but a viable vehicle going forward. And that's what the stories of And Still I Rise are about. Every single woman is talking about the future, not about the past. I think that your audience will really appreciate some of these stories, and I think they will truly see themselves reflected in so many of these different stories, because these are real women talking about what they had to do to survive, but what their solution was unionization.
Well, thank you for bringing to the forefront the current issue, right? We learn from our history, but currently sharing where Black women are working, right, and the power that unions have and are having on really impacting our lives and our future, and the legacies that we all want to leave. So what are the next steps for this work and this campaign, and how can people, specifically Black women, get involved?
Well, I think, we are so excited to be part of the larger, sort of wave of Black Lives Matter in the sense that, so many issues around, the whole Netroots conference, for example. The fact that these Black Lives Matter activists, stood in front of two of the Democratic Party's most progressive and said, look, it's good that you're talking about economic justice, but economic justice takes on so many different facets in the Black community. And you cannot separate economic justice from social justice, and you cannot separate economic justice from racial justice, and you can't separate economic justice from, state-sponsored violence. I'll give you two examples. Both Michael Brown's mother and Trayvon Martin's mother are union members. People don't know that. Michael Brown's mother is part of the United Food and Commercial Workers. Those are the folks when you go to the supermarket. Those are folks who, when you go to the supermarket, they're the cashiers. They're the folks who bag your groceries. They're the folks who are stock clerks. That's Michael Brown's mother is part of that union. Trayvon Martin's mother was part of the Office of Professional Employees Unions. She worked for the Miami-Dade government. She was an office worker. They're both union members. So for Black folks, again, economic justice, racial justice, stuff. And so, but in the progressive, sometimes in the progressive white economic world, these issues are separated. They talk about gross domestic product. They talk about, minimum wage, but they don't talk about the fact that, as bad as it might be to work at Walmart, if you have a criminal record, you can't even get a job at Walmart. Right. So these issues can't be separated in our communities. And I think that's why, again, what we're trying to highlight and push is to really push that intersectionality between these issues. So that our communities really understand that when you're fighting, not only does our communities understand, but that unions and civil rights groups that are more traditional have to understand that linkage too. That, again, economic rights and racial justice can be hand in hand. In fact, they've always been hand in hand. I mean, Black people coming to the United States was about economics. Let's be clear. White slave owners wanted to have Black people work for free to do work. I mean, so it has always been the case. And the more we get closer to that reality, the better our issues and our arguments and the richer the debate and discussion can be. When you separate the two, you basically water down both sides of the argument.
Right. It's
and
an incomplete
you have a less chance of winning. Yeah, it's an incomplete story. It's like if you only tell someone half the story, you're left scratching your head. Like, well, how did you get this way? In a country where everybody can pull themselves up from their bootstraps, well, first of all, let's be clear. That's a myth that someone created, and not everyone can read your history, and understand your history, and then put it into today's contextual situations. And that's, I mean, so you asked a big question, and I gave a big response. Our particular slice of this is we are aggressively trying to promote education around the importance of Black women being involved in the labor movement. We're talking with women's organizations. We're talking with civil rights organizations. We're talking with labor unions about this, and we're talking with the general public about this because we want to really spark a conversation. And we think that we are, to be in this moment that we're in around Black Lives Matter, it also elevates our debate and discussion as well. And we are very much appreciative of being part of that larger conversation. So another report I would definitely encourage your audience to look at is a report called Black Workers Matter, # Black Workers Matter. And it really goes into much more. If people want to know much more about statistics and details, which some people might, that report gives you a lot more data on the situation of Black folks today, how they got that way, how a lot of these trends have been historic, and solutions that can come out of this. Again, really believing that collective responses, in some ways, that collective responses can really help elevate individual responses. I think that so back to your point about either or. I think individual responses are important, but I think you really need to let's put it this way: someone has to create the track before Jesse Owens can run. It's like so we need the collective response first, and then individuals can shine in their full glory. It's kind of the way we look at some of this work that we do, and we really want to create those pathways so that individuals can really be their full selves, both in the workplace and in their home lives.
Excellent. So, like I said, it's always a both and paradigm, and that's really the holistic view. I think Bell Hooks actually talks about that a lot, the both and, right? So, it's again that we need both the collective and the individual working together. So, it sounds like for really next steps, right, is people getting informed. So, going to Black Workers Matter, and I will ask you for a minute for where you want people to go. But getting informed and then sharing, right? We need to raise awareness about these issues. So once you're informed, sharing the information so that other folks can really get their knowledge and their consciousness elevated about this issue, how it's impacting us, and currently what we can do to really start making efforts to, like you said, maybe join a labor movement, organize or advocate for labor unions in our organization or some other places where we can get involved in this collective action work. So how can people stay connected with you or this larger coalition effort for the Black Women Equal Pay movement?
And definitely like us on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page, and Still I Rise. So that's definitely one way. Folks can definitely sign up to get information about the And Still I Rise project on the website. It's and-still-i-rise-.org, and folks can sign up and see. They can see the report, and they can also sign up to be on our newsletters and get information from us. Myself, if folks want to tweet, I'm at Marc Bayard, MarcBayard. So folks can also, send information that way. So we definitely want to get people involved. Myself and my colleague, Kim Freeman Brown, who is the lead author on this report, we are definitely, we'd love to, talk to your network. We'd love to, if you guys would love to be interested in writing, future information and articles, participate in any webinars that you do or something like that. Mm-hmm. We would love to be connected, to your network as well. We've gone to a number of conferences this summer, sharing this information, and we'd love to be invited to, different conferences that people in your network are involved to. We really like to share this information with a lot of Black women mainstream organizations. We'd love to share this information with sororities. We'd really like to make sure that women who are struggling individually at work realize that possibly that part of this struggle is about race, and it's about gender. It's about so many issues, and it's not solely about their individual effort. In fact, there's been some really good studies that have been done around Black women in management. So it's not just Black women employees, but there's been around Black women in management being passed over and ignored. So this is definitely a systemic issue, and we want people to really think about this stuff systemically, and again to think about unions as a possible solution to some of these issues as well. So that's really the goal of our work.
Well, great. Thank you just for taking the time today to share this information and this issue, and even many of the solutions, or not some, but many of the solutions that you presented to us with the Black Women Rights community. So everyone that's listening, please share this interview, stay connected, get connected. Like you said, go to the andstillIrise.org, and I'll put that information below because I know it has dashes and different things, and at Marc Bayard on Twitter. Because it's such an important issue, and we talk heavily. I just wrote an article about the state of Black women leadership where I talk about the recent Black women management study and how many of us, we want to be leaders. We actually are more ambitious than they found in the white women who were in the study. But when we are in positions of leadership, we feel stifled, or many of us are being overlooked despite being qualified and credentialed for leadership positions. So there is a lot of work, like you said, that needs to be done systemically. And I hope that we all can be proactive contributors to changing that, whether in our own lives, but as a collective. Because like you said, when Black women are in leadership, we really change the world because we do come with a perspective of not just thinking about I, right? We think about the we. We think about the impact that it has in our families, our communities, and the larger society. So thank you so much, Marc, for spending this time with us today, and we really appreciate it.
Great, and feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or concerns or anything of the sort.
All right, awesome. So if you'd like more information on Black women leadership and social change, please stay connected with the Black Women Rights Movement. You can go to blackwomenrise.com or QuanishaSmith.com. And please check us out on Facebook and Twitter. You can find all those links below. So thanks again, and until next time, everyone, peace and love. Quanisha.